Almost every roller coaster YouTuber has made some video ranking the coasters at their home park. I wanted to make a similar video for my home park, Cedar Point, but there are tons and tons of videos ranking Cedar Point's coasters, so I wanted to do something different. For this video, I will rank every single Cedar Point coaster by its best sequence of elements. These are the moments of the ride that you remember most. Maybe it's just one element or a stretch of elements that all deliver on the thrills. This is Cedar Point's coasters ranked by their best stretch of elements. Before we start, I want to say thanks to you all for the support this channel has been getting lately. Every single one of you that hits the subscribe button motivates me to create more awesome coaster videos. So, if you haven't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the channel. I didn't want one of the spots on this list to be a huge chunk of a long ride, thus, I limited it so that only a sequence with a maximum of 4 to 5 elements can be eligible for this list. If the entire ride is less than 4 elements, then I could include the entire ride. Coming in at last place is the entirety of Wilderness Run. Wilderness Run is a children's roller coaster manufactured by Intamin, and it was actually the first roller coaster ever built by Intamin. The layout only has 3 elements, being the turn off the lift hill, the triangle hill, and the turn into the station. This is one of 2 rides that I have not ridden at the park, the other being our number 16 pick, Woodstock Express, the Vekoma Jr. coaster that opened in 1999. Based off of the POV video, I chose the first drop and first couple of turns and a small airtime moment for this list. This looks to be the most thrilling part of the ride, as you have the most speed. Coming in at number 15 is Corkscrew, the aerodynamics looping coaster that was the first coaster to feature 3 inversions, being a loop and a double corkscrew. The part I chose for this is the first drop, airtime hill, loop, and hop into the straight track. In the back row, you get whipped over the tight crest and into the straight drop before a janky airtime hill that the train just flies over, delivering some ejector airtime that is sort of ruined by the terrible restraints. The train then goes into a classic vertical loop before hopping up into some straight track, giving some airtime in the front rows. Next up in the 14th spot is the part after the second lift with the janky S-curve-like element, bank straight track, and final helix on Cedar Creek Mine Ride. I also considered the section at the beginning with the banked airtime pop, drop, straight track over water, and the upwards helix right before that second lift. These helices are the most thrilling part of the ride, the rest being mostly straight track and turns. In the 13th spot is the first drop and 2 speed hills on Blue Streak, the park's 1964 PTC wooden roller coaster. This section starts with a 72-foot, 45-degree drop right off the lift hill, hitting the top speed of 40 miles an hour at the bottom. The train flies over a small bunny hill, delivering some nice sustained airtime before performing a similar element, except this one has a tiny bit of laterals because it's turning to the left. The last of the family thrill coasters on this list is Iron Dragon, specifically the drop off of the second lift and the rest of the ride beyond that. The train drops off of the second lift and turns slightly to the left before turning to the right and back to the left again. The train is gaining momentum as the cars swing back and forth a few times. The track turns to the right one last time, swinging the cars to the left before the train dives down into a drawn-out helix right over the water, which is a cool visual effect. The train dips off of the helix and hops up into the final brake run. This is a fun way to end the ride with the fairly intense swinging, that is intense for a family coaster, and the scenic helix over the water. Kicking off the extreme thrill coasters is the first drop, loop, and dive loop on Rougarou, Cedar Point's floorless coaster manufactured by B&M. While this is the lowest of the extreme thrill coasters, it's still a solid sequence of elements. The train dips off of the lift hill, picking up speed as it turns back around 180 degrees. The track levels out as the train drops down the 52-degree drop, giving some mild floater airtime in the back row before hitting the top speed of 60 miles an hour. The train shoots up into a massive vertical loop that is not only a fun element while you are on the ride, it is also super picturesque. The train exits the loop, turning to the left before rising up and whipping down a dive loop. This is a great way to start the ride, giving mild floater airtime on the first drop before 2 massive inversions, really setting the tone for the rest of the ride. Starting out the top 10 is the first part of Gatekeeper, the B&M wing coaster that opened in 2013. This section includes the wing over drop, the Immelman, floater airtime hill, corkscrew, and zero G-roll. Before this section even starts, riders are getting an awesome view of Lake Erie before the train crests the lift. Instead of dropping right into a straight first drop, the track slowly turns upside down before dropping the train, giving some awesome hang time in the front rows. The train picks up speed as it plunges down the drop, hitting 67 miles an hour in the process. The train flies up into the ride's second inversion, an Immelman. Riders get a break from the inversions with a large floater airtime hill delivering sustained floater airtime to the entire train. but Gatekeeper throws in 2 more inversions before this sequence ends, with a massive floaty corkscrew and a 0G roll that intertwines with the front gate, giving a good near-miss effect. Number 9 is the launch and first passage of the twisted spikes on Wicked Twister. This is an inverted impulse coaster manufactured by Intamin, and it was the tallest and fastest inverted coaster in the world, standing at 215 feet and traveling at 72 miles an hour, until another impulse opened in China in early 2021, standing 230 feet tall and traveling 74 miles an hour. The best part of Wicked Twister starts with the first launch. The first couple times I rode this coaster, the countdown was very quick and not very noticeable. The only warning you have is a fast 3-2-1 from the ride-out before you are launched into that first spike. And this is not a mild launch either. It gets you up to the 60-some miles an hour speed very rapidly. The train rises up into the spike before losing all of its speed and falling backwards back into the launch track. The magnetic LIM launch system boosts the train backwards at a higher speed than the initial launch and into the backwards spike. Sitting in the front or the back row will get you highest up the spike, also giving a cool visual of the twisting track right above you. I do prefer Rougarou and Gatekeeper over Wicked Twister, but I think that Wicked Twister's best sequence outclasses Gatekeeper and Rougarou's best. In the number 8 spot is the first drop, Immelman, and drop off the mid-course brake run on Valravn. This is the most recent B&M coaster built at the park, opening in 2016. The best sequence of elements on the ride starts out with the first drop. The train turns 90 degrees to the right directly off the lift hill. It attaches to a holding brake which holds riders right over the drop 223 feet in the air for about 3 seconds before dropping the train. The train drops vertically 90 degrees straight down, hitting 75 miles an hour at the bottom. The train heads up into an Immelman before plunging back down to the ground and picking up a lot of speed. The train turns up, to the right, and into the mid-course brake run. These brakes slow the train down quite a bit before the train heads over the very small crest and goes down the second steep drop of the ride. While Valravn is kind of a one-trick pony, those drops are pretty awesome. Number 7 is Gemini, the park's aerodynamics racing hybrid coaster. The part I chose for this is the final airtime hills and Helix. I really wanted to include the head chopper drop, which is my favorite part of the ride, but the elements preceding it and following it are a drawn-out turn and a mid-course brake run. But following the mid-course brake run, the train drops down to the ground, giving some solid laterals and airtime in the back row. The train then heads over 2 airtime hills, both giving some great flowjector airtime before a janky lateral-filled Helix to end the ride. This classic ride is super fun and underrated, and I really hope that it's not removed soon, even though I think that will happen. Number 6 is the finale on Raptor, the B&M inverted coaster that opened in 1994. After a first half filled with massive inversions, the train hits the mid-course brake run and drops back down with a curved drop. The train flies through a corkscrew and then riders get a break before heading into the finale. This finale starts with a tiny dip leading into a corkscrew and a double helix to end the ride. This small dip is the perfect transition into the corkscrew, giving riders a tiny pop of floater airtime before crushing them into their seats with this intense and whippy corkscrew filled with positive and lateral g-forces. The train then heads into a super long double helix as the g-forces get stronger and stronger throughout this element, pinning riders into their seat before letting go and exiting the helix. The train turns to the left and whips into the final brakes with this weird transition that may or may not slam your head onto the side of the restraint. Some people may not like this transition, but I find it super fun and it gives me a good laugh while I'm exiting the ride. Number 5 is the first part of Maverick, containing the first drop, snap turns, and airtime hills. Maverick was the first ever Intamin Blitz coaster, bringing a new fast-paced coaster concept into the industry. I wanted to include the 2 stengel dives and final airtime hill because I love the second stengel dive, but I think that the first part is superior. The ride starts with this super fast launch lift hill, bringing the train up to the maximum height very quickly. The LSM launch system cuts off and the train crests the lift before plunging down the 95-degree drop, giving some insane ejector airtime in the back row of the train. Riders are flung out of their seats, then quickly pinned into their seats with a good dose of positive g-force at the bottom. The train turns to the right before getting whipped back to the left. This rapid transition gives some solid laterals as well as a pop of airtime. The train continues turning left, then whips back to the right in another similar transition, giving similar forces to the previous. Maverick keeps the intensity going by hopping into a strong ejector airtime hill. This sequence of elements really brings the intensity, delivering a mix of positive, negative, and lateral forces. The number 4 spot is taken by Millennium Force, the Intamin Giga coaster built in 2000. The sequence of elements I chose for this is the first drop, overbank, and airtime hill. Riders are pulled up the cable lift at a pretty fast speed. This lift hill also gives an amazing view of Lake Erie to one side and the rest of the park to the other side. The train crests the lift and heads down the 300-foot 80-degree drop, reaching a top speed of 93 miles an hour at the bottom. The crest of this drop is at the perfect size, large enough to make the drop feel as if it lasts forever, and small enough to deliver ejector airtime in the back rows of the train. The drop bottoms out and the train heads into a massive overbank turn that the train just hauls through, delivering strong positive G-forces throughout, and even causing some riders to gray out. The train exits the element and goes into a drawn-out left turn that doesn't really deliver too much force, as the point of this turn is to showcase the ride's speed. The train heads up and into a massive floater airtime hill, giving some solid sustained floater airtime to the whole train. The beginning sequence really is a preview to the rest of the ride, with speed, airtime, and positive forces, all of which occur frequently throughout the rest of the layout. While I think Maverick's start is much more intense than this, I think that Millennium's start is much more enjoyable and fun. Coming in at the number 3 spot is the finale on Magnum XL200. Magnum XL200 was the first ever full-circuit coaster over 200 feet, so its height, speed, and drop are what brought in the crowds when the ride first opened. Now, Magnum is still very well regarded as a great coaster, but for a different reason: the finale. After the massive first drop and drawn-out hill, the train enters a flowjector airtime hill and a pretzel-shaped turnaround. The turnaround dumps the train into a tunnel for a triangle-shaped hill, giving a pop of floater airtime. This is followed by a similar element giving similar forces. These two hills are like a sneak peek for what is to come. The train passes over a curved hill, giving some laterals and a little bit of floater airtime. Now, here is where the finale starts. The train passes over 4 back-to-back triangle-shaped ejector airtime hills, the final one being in a tunnel. These hills are shaped weirdly, with a perfectly straight ascent and descent, but the crest of the hill is super tight, making the hill look like a triangle. The train flies over the small crest of the hill, delivering some of the strongest ejector airtime found on any coaster. Not only are the crests super sharp, but so are the valleys, delivering some good positive forces also. Each hill delivers stronger airtime and forces than the last, with the last hill in the tunnel being the most intense of them all. The number 2 spot is taken by the beginning section of Steel Vengeance, the RMC Hyper Hybrid coaster that opened in 2018. Steel Vengeance is known for featuring the most airtime in any coaster, and therefore the coaster must start with loads of airtime. And that is exactly what Steel Vengeance does. After heading up the unnecessarily loud lift hill, the train crests the lift and heads down the 90-degree drop. This drop delivers some strong ejector airtime in the back row, setting the tone for the rest of the ride. The train passes over a tiny speed hill that leads into the first element. This first element is like a massive top hat-like element, delivering some sustained flowjector airtime to the entire train for at least 4 to 5 seconds, while also delivering lateral forces because of how it is turning to the right. Next up is another massive airtime hill, also turning to the right throughout, but this one is banked to the outside, delivering strong sustained airtime for almost 5 seconds. These first elements deliver on the airtime with a quick pop and a few extremely strong and sustained airtime moments. For this spot, I could have also put the step up before the mid-course, drop off the mid-course, double up, and S-hill, or I could have put the finale with the bunny hills. But even though those sections are both amazing, I prefer the beginning with the large elements. Finally, coming to our number 1 pick, we have the launch and top hat on Top Thrill Dragster. The ride only has 2 elements, but those 2 elements are amazing. The train rolls out of the station and lines up with the launch track. And it is a while before the train actually launches, so you are just sitting up there waiting, and it really builds up your anticipation. When the time finally comes and your adrenaline is at the maximum, you'll see the traffic light right in front of you light up and the coaster launches. Riders are pinned to the back of their seats as the train accelerates to what feels like the speed of light. The train hits the top speed of around 120 miles an hour before shooting up the massive 420-foot top hat. Riders experience some strong positive G-forces as the train rises up the tower, and when you reach the top, you will get an awesome view of Millennium Force and its layout to the front and the rest of the park to either side of you. I prefer the view of Millennium Force because you have more time to enjoy the view, but on Top Thrill Dragster you are only up there for a few seconds, and before you know it you drop back down. Instead of featuring a regular twisted drop like on the other Intamin accelerator coasters, you twist through a 270-degree spiral drop, which has a similar feeling to the spikes on Wicked Twister, but much faster and much higher up. The banking levels out and riders again get an extreme dose of positive G-forces as the train bottoms out, ending the ride. While this ride is super short, it is the most intense coaster in the park by far, and one of the most intense coasters out there. I do rank it 4th in the park, behind Millennium Force, Maverick, and Steel Vengeance. Top Thrill Dragster outclasses any small part of those rides by themselves, but as a whole ride, I prefer them over Dragster. So that'll wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I post a lot of roller coaster related content, and I have much more unique video ideas, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. I will see you all next time.